Hey, what is up, everybody? So I want to continue to talk about this whole DK Metcalf potential situation. This is one where I think lots of us are wondering if this is going to be another one of those situations where the Packers are in the conversations and then nothing actually happens, because it has felt like for the past few seasons that has really been the case when it comes to receivers that the Packers have potentially, been talking with. But I want to share some information that came out earlier this morning. And if you guys have been following the entire news cycle regarding DK Metcalf, to start off, in the past week or so, it initially came out from Corbin Smith that he said one team to keep close tabs on the Packers. A source indicated they have had discussions with Seahawks this week and have an offer on the table that includes a high pick and a young receiver on roster to acquire Metcalf. Obvious connection to Schneider as well. And then Peter Bukowski also confirmed that. And then we had Matt Schneidman saying that, according to his sources, that there hadn't been any of these conversations. Then today we had Mike Garafolo, who is a very respected NFL reporter. It says here, someone shared on X, Travis Hancock said, per Mike Garafolo on @Puck Sports, Raiders, Packers, and Panthers are in on DK Metcalf. So it seems to be another indication there that maybe those initial reports on the Packers, talking with the Seahawks regarding DK Metcalf were accurate. We don't exactly know at what point they started talking, but it's sounding like they are actually interested, and the question becomes, how interested are they? Are they serious about this? Are they just sort of feeling things out? Maybe they don't actually, maybe they're just trying to check to see what he's worth. But according to those initial reports, they had an offer on the table. So that is pretty interesting. And here's the exact quote from Mike Garafolo, or Garofalo, however you pronounce his name. Forgive me if I got that wrong. But he says here on that show at Puck Sports this morning, it was either this morning or last night, I know people are talking about the Packers as well. I'm sure there's interest there as well. So those are the three teams just off the top of my head. Basically what I've heard now in the past couple of days that I would put in the mix. And so we're going to start seeing a lot more things go down with, free agency starting next week. And so I'm curious to see, what people think DK Metcalf is actually worth, because it came out yesterday. Diana Rossini said that the Seahawks want a first and a third for DK. I share my thoughts already that I think that's a little too much, in my opinion, a first and a third. I would prefer, I think a second is more reasonable for DK Metcalf, just because you have to, give him a new contract. So he's going to be expensive. At the same time, I was contemplating this morning. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I'll get to some of these comments in a second, because I see a lot of you guys commenting. I think a second is reasonable in my mind. A first might be a little much. At the same time, I don't think it would be terrible. Like, if news came out, Packers traded a first-round pick for DK Metcalf, I wouldn't be upset, honestly. I would rather go for a second, to keep your first-round pick. But here's the thing with the whole, trading picks. I do think sometimes teams value first-round picks too much, especially later first-round picks, because I think people are very confident in their ability to draft players. And as we see time and time again, I mean, the bust rate in the first round is like 40 to 50%, 50 to 60%. And so first-round picks are not a sure thing. And that's why sometimes I feel like trading first-round picks could be smart. Obviously, you can't trade all of them, because then your team is going to be way too expensive, and having those cheap contracts is very, you need to hit on guys in the first round a lot to have a very good team. And I do think, though, sometimes when your team is sort of built in a way where you already have some other players on cheaper contracts, you can sort of take that risk and trade a first-round pick for a player. Where in DK Metcalf situation, here's the thing with DK Metcalf. He is a guy who has been incredibly consistent. He has played 15 games in every single season he's been around, 15 last year. And he's a guy who's been around at least close to 1,000 yards every single year. He's had 900 in 2019, 992 in 2024. And Geno Smith wasn't even that great of a quarterback last season. I think Jordan Love is much better. And so I think if DK came in, he would probably produce way better here. He's only 27 years old as well. So when you sign him to a deal, then You can probably have him for 3-4 years, still in his prime. I mean, there's so many things to like. Let me get to some of your comments here. This is my first time being live in a while, so it's great to talk with you guys here. So Desmond says, wow, I hope we do. He's very good receiver. Go Pack Go. Great job. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Sammy Boy says he's an athletic freak that can catch overthrows. He's faster than Christian Watson, 4.3340. Christian Watson's a 4.3640. He is a deep threat that the Packers, I think the Packers do need a deep threat to replace Christian Watson until he's back from his injury. It could be around week 12. His dad had shared that initially, that if things had gone exactly according to, I guess, your typical ACL recovery plan, he would be back about week 12. And so that's the one area the Packers need to improve. Because of Christian Watson gone, you need to get that deep threat guy, and DK Metcalf would fit that. He also can do a lot more, but he has that breakaway speed, and so I totally agree with that there. What's up, Brandon King Carter? What's good, Luke? We should get Garrett and Tay, Myles Garrett, and Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams is intriguing as well because of his cheap contract, or not cheap, but I think you can get him for much cheaper than DK, just because you are not having to pay up because he's 32 years old. Okay, Anthony Nenya Business 420 says, do you think we trade Romeo Doubs or Wicks if we didn't end up trading for DK? That's a very good question. If we look back to the initial report, if it was accurate, from Corbin Smith, who's a reporter, I think he covers the Seahawks, I'm pretty sure. But he did say there's an offer on the table. This was a few days back. That includes a high pick and a young receiver. So if that's accurate, who is the young receiver? Who do you guys think the young receiver is? If this is accurate, if the Packers actually have an offer on the table for a high pick and a young receiver, who do you think the young receiver on the table is? I'm curious. I don't think it can be Jaden Reed because the Seahawks already have a slot receiver in Jackson Smith and Jigba. And if we look at his snap count last year, he had 83.6% of the snaps in the slot. So it can't be Jaden Reed. I think you take him off the table, first off. Sam says he thinks it's Dobbs. Sleepy421A says keep Dobbs. Flossie says Wicks, Dobbs, or Melton. Okay, then you have Dontavian Wicks. Here's the thing with Dontavian Wicks. He is one of the best receivers in the NFL when it comes to getting open. His problem has been drops, just like Devontae Adams in his first couple of years in Green Bay. And if you trade Dontavian Wicks to the Seattle Seahawks, you run the risk of him figuring out his drop issues and suddenly becoming a top 10 to 15 receiver. So do you want to take that risk for DK Metcalf? Because Wicks is insanely talented. If he fixes those drop issues, he is going to be a dominant receiver. That's a question. Can he fix that? And that's where there's uncertainty, and maybe why you want to get a guy like DK, because he's consistent. You can trust him. I think he has like a 7-ish% career drop percentage. And so I think it's risky to trade Dontavian Wicks because I think his upside is insane. If he figures out his drop issues, his upside is insane. But then you have Romeo Doubs. And here's the thing with Romeo Doubs. I think he's a number one receiver. I do. You may agree. You may disagree. He gets open at one of the highest rates in the NFL, same as Dontavian Wicks. He's a better contested catcher than DK Metcalf. He doesn't have the same athletic ability as like a Christian Watson or as a DK Metcalf, but I think he's a very reliable receiver, and I honestly think DK Metcalf and Romeo Doubs will pair nicely. You have DK who can win down the field with that speed, who can also win in other ways, who's great after the catch. You have Romeo Doubs, who maybe isn't quite as prolific after the catch, but he's very consistent. He's reliable. I think that having those two guys in the field together is great. And so I don't love the idea of trading Wicks or Doubs. Then you have Christian Watson. The thing is, would the Seahawks want to trade for a guy coming off an ACL injury who has 1 year left on his deal? I'm not sure about that one either. Personally, based on those three receivers, I would rather them trade Christian Watson. Then the question becomes, what is the high pick? I think if you're giving a player away, you shouldn't have to give a first round pick as well. I feel like a Third plus a player, I feel like a second, maybe you add a player in there depending on who it is. But I mean, I've seen lots of ideas out there about, what people think he's worth, and I'll go through that and look at some other history of receiver trades recently. But let me get back to a few of your comments. Desmond said it's Wicks, Luke. It could be. Sometimes you have to take risks, and maybe Brian Gutekunst says, we like Wicks. We like what he can be. We think he has a chance to be great, but maybe they want to go for that consistency. And if Wicks helps gets it done, then okay. But I just don't. I mean, it wouldn't be shocking if Wicks, went off with the Seahawks. One Don MUFC 45 says, I will give him Dobbs. Jacob says, at what point do you say enough is enough with Wicks drops? I feel that Devontae started fixing it by this point. Devontae didn't really start fixing it till his third season. So that's why I say give Dontavian Wicks the third year. And if he can't fix it, then maybe you say, okay, maybe it's not going to work out. But Devontae, his drop percentage wasn't quite as bad, I'm pretty sure, in his second year as Wicks, but it was close. And Devontae Adams fixed it. Imagine if the Packers said, oh, we don't like Devontae, let's trade him for someone else. Imagine if that had happened. That would be a bad... Yeah, I'm just concerned about trading Wicks. And Sam says, just sign Adams so you don't have to trade anybody. That's not... I mean, signing Adams is not bad. I mean, there's so many different options here. It's not like, oh, this is the perfect decision. This is a bad decision. I think that with DK Metcalf, you're going to have to trade something, and you have to give him a lot of money. Devontae Adams, you can probably get him for closer to $15 million, but then it's going to be a shorter deal. He's older. So with DK, you can have him for 3 to 4 or 5 years and build that chemistry with Jordan Love. Let's see more comments here. Flossie says, Wicks is Adams 2.0, leading league in separation and drops just like Adams' early career. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Wicks took a huge step in his third season. Kurt Meister says, 4th round pick. I just think that's not enough for DK Metcalf. Because, yes, you have to pay him, but a 4th round pick, I mean, are hit or miss. I mean, if I was the Seahawks, I would not trade DK Metcalf for a 4th round pick. I think that would be a bad move if you're running the Seahawks. They said they wanted a 1st and a 3rd. I assume that's their starting point. They'll probably come much lower. Okay, but now I want to look into a few different... what's up, God of Thunder? Good to see you here. I appreciate you always commenting on my videos. Appreciate your support, definitely. So I was looking up some past receiver trades, and there are a ton of them out there. But some of the bigger ones, you got Tyreek Hill in 2022, goes for a 1st, a 2nd, 2 4ths, and a 6th. Clearly, that's much different. DK Metcalf is not Tyreek Hill. Now is when Tyreek was like totally in his prime, but he went for a ton. You have the Devontae Adams trade when the Packers traded him to the Raiders when Devontae was 29, goes for a 1st and a 2nd. DK is not what Devontae was then. Devontae was seen, I think, as like the best receiver in the NFL at that time for a 1st and a 2nd. Then you have A.J. Brown, which was such a terrible decision by the Titans to trade away A.J. Brown. They traded him for a 1st and a 3rd, which included they used that 1st round pick on Treylon Burks. But A.J. Brown, I'm pretty sure he was around 24 at the time when they traded A.J. Brown. So all of those guys included a 1st round pick. Now you can debate if you think, I mean, I don't think DK is what Tyreek was at the time or Devontae Adams was at the time, so I don't think he's going to be going for that value. A.J. Brown, though, he was younger, but he had pretty similar numbers to like what DK Metcalf has now. And so if I was the Seahawks and I have a 27-year-old receiver who still has a few years left in his prime, I don't think it's crazy for the Seahawks to say, if you want DK Metcalf, you have to give us a 1st round pick. I don't think that's crazy. As I said, I think a more reasonable value is a 2nd round pick, just because, I mean, I would just prefer it. I mean, obviously, if I'm a Packers fan, I'm like, yeah, let's give him a 2nd and not a 1st. But I don't think it's crazy to ask for a 1st round pick, because when you look at the free agent wide receiver market, there's a lot of guys who used to be really good and still are somewhat good, but they're a lot older. They're closer to 30. Some of them are 30. Some of them coming off of injuries. DK is just a much more sure bet than any of those guys in free agency. And so I don't think it's a terrible idea to trade a 1st round pick. But I feel like if you trade a 1st round pick, you don't need to trade a player, in my opinion. What's up, Michael? You say, how am I going to get to work during the draft? Oh, you live around Green Bay. LOL, I work at CPL blocks from this. Oh, from a few blocks from the stadium. Yeah, I assume the traffic in Green Bay is going to be crazy. It'll be cool to see what it's like there. I'm not going to be in Green Bay because, if you guys know me, I live in Dallas, which is obviously a long ways from Green Bay. And, I thought about it a little bit about wanting to go to the draft, but at the same time, I like my setup here, and I like to be able to just, get things done right away and get the news out right away with my setup here. What's up? She's bang sup. Interesting. All right, here we have from John Sherwood. LVN over Cooper DeJean, not even the same draft. Here we have from Drew McBrady giving us some other trades. Hopkins 4th to 5th, Dotson 3rd with 5th, Cooper 3rd. I think DK's, with where DK Metcalf is right now, he's better than all those guys. Definitely at this moment. What's up, Smitty Hutt Jr.? Good to see you. Drew McGrady says, anything more than a 2 is robbery. If we are including Dobbs or Wicks, a 3rd and a 5th would be fair. I don't think anything more than a 2 is robbery. I mean, I guess my thing is with these draft picks, as I brought up earlier, for some of you guys who were here right when I started, I think sometimes draft picks can be overvalued because there's so much uncertainty. I mean, if you are the GM, you are the scouts, you may have this strong conviction about a certain player and be like, oh, there's no way this guy's going to, not work out. But I mean, so many first round picks are like flipping a coin. And so that's why sometimes I feel like teams should be more willing to trade first round picks. Sometimes I'm surprised for how cheap some guys get traded for because, I mean, if you trade for DK Metcalf, he's most likely going to play majority of the season. He's rarely injured. He has consistently been one of the best deep threats in the NFL. So you just take away the uncertainty when you trade draft capital for one of those type guys. So I would rather a second round pick. As a Packers fan, clearly I'd rather trade as little as possible. But at first, it wouldn't be a bad move. Because think about it. Eric Stokes with a first round pick. Imagine if they had traded that first round pick for a top tier receiver at the time. Sure, you have to pay the guy. Lucas Van Ness, first round pick. Hasn't really worked out well. Has played as a bottom tier starting type edge rusher. Sometimes you hit on guys in the first round, sometimes you don't. It's sort of a flip of a coin, honestly, the hit rates. And so you could end up hitting on a guy in the first round this year. You could totally whiff. With DK, you know what you're getting. So that's why I'm like, first round pick isn't a bad idea. I think Gutekunst does love his draft picks, so I don't know if he'd want to give a first round pick, and that's where there may be teams that are willing to outbid Gutekunst based on the Packers' history when it comes to acquiring receivers. They have not really been a team that says, we're going to go out and do our hardest and outbid every single person to get a top-tier receiver. They were in conversations supposedly in conversations for lots of receivers like OBJ back in the day. I remember getting my hopes up, feeling like maybe this is finally the moment. Then the Rams sign him, and you're like, okay, why'd I get my hopes up? Why am I getting hopeful for the Packers to make a big move for a receiver when it never happens? And here I am right now. I'm not I wouldn't say what am I trying to say here? I like the idea of DK Metcalf in Green Bay, but at the same time, I'm not like this has to get done or else. I do think the Packers have a lot of good receivers. I still think they're underrated. They need to get better when it comes to drops. What is up, Joel? Good to see you. JT Nickelbag says, I would love DK, but no way would I trade a first for a receiver ever. I disagree. I would totally trade a first for a receiver, but I would rather trade a second. Vito says second for DK, maybe Dobbs too. For some reason, Aaron Nagler wants to keep Wicks over anybody. I mean, I fully get the Wicks thing. I was touching on it a second ago for you guys who just come in now. But Dontavian Wicks has top 5 NFL receiver upside. He has the ability. He has the athleticism. If he fixes his drop problem, he could become, like the next Devontae Adams. So it's risky to trade. I almost think it's riskier to trade Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Doubs, even though I love Doubs. I just think the ceiling on Dontavian Wicks is like out of this world. And I don't think I'm being like too confident in that. If he can't fix his drop problems, clearly Dontavian Wicks is not going to be a top 10 receiver. If he does, it's going to be it'll be crazy. Heath says Green Bay sucks at first rounders. Sometimes. Most NFL teams aren't great at drafting players. I mean, it's just hard. It seemingly is very hard, even like for guys, scouts and stuff who are scouting all season long. It's very easy to miss on players. Like it's as I said, it's like a flip of a coin lots of the time. Because I think since Gutekunst has come in, what you consider maybe a hit in the first round is close to 40 to 50%-ish, 50%-ish. I did a video on it a while. I need to look up the numbers again, but yeah, draft. I mean, you need to hit on draft picks because the thing is, you can't just be trading all your draft picks away and having to spend up on all your players because then you're going to have a ton of high-priced guys and then other guys, undrafted free agents, guys that, probably aren't going to make it work. But DNZL says Wicks will have a big year this year. I think it could definitely happen. Sleepy says DK plus Dobbs plus Reed. Are you saying trade Dobbs and Reed for DK? Is that what you're saying? Once Dobbs gets over the hump and over his concussion problems, he'll be a great number 2. Yeah, I think that hopefully Dobbs is fine with those concussions. I think him and DK Metcalf would pair nicely. JT Nickelbag says they do suck at first-round picks. Maybe they should ask their community who to pick in first round because I certainly remember some years when I wanted them to take a guy and they picked someone else. Yeah, I feel like it's really easy to look back in hindsight and say they should have picked this guy, they should have picked this guy. And obviously sometimes, they could have done better, as most teams in the NFL. But I think they're fine at drafting first-rounders. I mean, they're pretty close to probably the rest of the NFL when it comes to hitting on first-rounders. Michael Petru says, guys, I think the big question is, are you either going after DK or Tay? Yeah, with Devontae Adams, he's old for the NFL player, 32. He is going to be cheaper. So I would prefer if you told me you had to either trade a first round pick for like DK Metcalf or Trey Hendrickson, I would trade my first round pick for Trey Hendrickson. I think the need is bigger at edge rusher. I think the Packers could easily be a top 5 scoring offense by picking up a cheap free agent wide receiver. I think that they could be a massive problem in the playoffs if they trade a first-round pick for an edge rusher. So I think the Packers no doubt get better picking up Devontae or picking up DK Metcalf, but I don't think it's the move that changes everything for them. I think it will make them better. I think the move that changes everything is getting Trey Hendrickson. I think that's a much bigger. That would impact this team much bigger in a much bigger way for 2025 than getting DK Metcalf. DNZL says Melton plus a 4th round for DK. I doubt the Seahawks take that. Wasn't Bo Melton originally on the Seahawks? Wasn't he a 7th rounder from the Seahawks? I'm pretty sure he was. Vito says, I feel like Devontae's market will be big. I mean, there are definitely going to be teams out there wanting him. I've heard he wants to go to the West Coast. So that's not Green Bay. It just depends on, what is Devontae at this point in his career really wanting? What does he want at this point in his career? Is he looking for, is his biggest thing the money? Is he going to go where the money's the most? Is he trying to find the balance between the money and the contender? Because it would be a perfect story for him to end his career in Green Bay. That would just be, I would love to see him come back to Green Bay. I like that idea. Official Low says, just offer them next year's first round a 5th rounder for this year and Dobbs, Wicks, or Watson, I think that's a little over. I think that's an overpay. I think if you give the Seahawks a 1st round pick, you don't need to give them a receiver. I think you just give them a straight up first. I think that will get the job done. Oh, Sleepy says no, just the lineup. Okay. Gotcha. Is DeAndre Hopkins a free agent? Is he? I honestly don't remember. Is DeAndre Hopkins... How old is DeAndre Hopkins now? He has to be like... Okay, he is a free agent, I think. But I think he's just... I'm not sure how old he is now. I'm pretty sure he's a lot old. He's 32. I'd much rather go for Devontae. John says, keep all receivers, add one vet. Yeah, because there was that report in the past week or two from, who was it? Dan Graziano said the Packers want a veteran receiver, no doubt. I wouldn't be shocked if at the end of all of this that, the Packers add like not a complete no name, but just a guy who's like, you're like, wait, okay. After all this talk about these bigger name receivers, which happens a lot in Green Bay. Rick says, I think we should trade for Hendrickson instead of DK and draft a receiver. I would prefer to do that. I would prefer, as I said a second ago, I would prefer to trade for Hendrickson than DK. No doubt. Because I really do think if the Packers did nothing at receiver, which they're not going to do nothing, they're going to at least pick up someone in free agency, I would assume, even if it's like a cheap guy. But if they did nothing, I think they'd still have a top 10 offense. Because here's the thing, if Dontavian Wicks, if we could say for a fact that Dontavian Wicks was not going to have a problem with drops, sure, you add some more depth at receiver, but I think they'd be fine without doing anything. And even if, so I just don't think the receiver is the biggest need. Edge rusher is definitely a bigger need. Adams and Hendrickson would be great. Yeah, that'd be great. Trade a 1st round pick for Hendrickson. Sign Devontae Adams to a 1 to 2 year, $15 million per year contract. That solves your receiver problem for a couple of years. Not necessarily a problem, just boosts your receiver room for a couple of years. And you get one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. The only problem with those two guys, they're both, Devontae's 32, Hendrickson's 30. But it would solve a lot of problems in the next couple seasons. JT Nickelback says, it's not hindsight when you wanted them to take the guy you wanted and you watch them ball out somewhere else like DeJean. That's true. If you wanted him first, then yeah, you're right. Not hindsight. Official Low, as unrealistic as it may be, I would love to see us trade Jair in a 3rd for DK, sign Tay Adams back, and bring in Khalil Mack. It'll be like when we brought Julius Peppers in. Yeah, Jair in a 3rd for DK. I think that's a reasonable trade there. That's reasonable. Yeah, that would solve that. I don't know if they trade for DK though, they don't also need to sign Devontae. I think that would be a little much because I think they have enough outside of with Dobbs and Wicks on the outside. Michael says, you're probably right to stay home for the draft. We expect 300,000 people to come to Green Bay. The city is only 100K people. All the hotels are booked. And my friend is renting his house for $4K a night. $4,000 a night. Oh my goodness. That is insane. Golly. Smooth 5 says, sign Tay for low and go get Trey. I like that. I would definitely prefer that than just getting DK if we can get Trey Hendrickson. I think the Packers are going to do something at edge rusher. I got a feeling. Trill Bill says, Adams had his time and chances to stay in Green Bay, but he wanted to go play with his college QB and then go try and fix things with A-Rod. Yeah, it does make you wonder what things would have been like if Devontae Adams stayed in Green Bay for his whole career, how things would have gone. TMM23, appreciate the live, brother. Killing it. Appreciate it. Thank you for watching. John said, I think Max Crosby screams Packer. Yeah, he did just sign the deal in a few days ago with the Raiders. So unfortunately, he's off the table. But Myles Garrett is still out there. The Browns continue to say that they're not going to trade him. But Myles Garrett continues to say, I'm not going to play for you. So I would assume in the end, Myles Garrett gets traded. I feel like the Browns are probably just playing, hardball and like, we're not trading you. We're not trading you. Teams call, we're not trading him. And I think it's probably just, when you do that, maybe you increase his value a little bit. Maybe you are trying to convince, because if the Browns are like, yeah, we're easily trading him, then teams maybe aren't quite as bold in what they're offering. UVIXIA says, I would be content if the Packers gave their first and a later pick if we got the Seahawks second and DK. Packers have a great history in the second round. First and a later pick, second and DK. That could work. The Shield says Packers usually offer pennies to other teams and players. I doubt we'll get DK. Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if someone else offered more than the Packers for DK Metcalf. Because the Packers have never really been one to really go all out to acquire receivers outside of the ones they draft. Dave says if Packers won a Super Bowl, they need Devontae and Hendrickson. If they get both, I think they will be legit contenders. I think that would take them to a different level, definitely. Just because of the consistency of Devontae Adams. I still think he's playing solid football. Hopefully he could do it for a few more years. And Hendrickson is, one of the most effective pass rushers in the NFL. 17.5 sacks the past 2 seasons, each of the past 2 seasons. The Packers defense, was already really good with a pretty weak pass rush. And if they added Hendrickson, oof. How much cap space do the Packers have? Let me do an updated look on that. Because I know they signed a couple signings the past few days. So currently, according to Over the Cap, the Packers have $45 million in cap space, which is a ton compared to previous years. They got a lot of space. Jeff says, trade a third with Dobbs for DK and then first for Hendrickson. Third with Dobbs for DK and then a first for Hendrickson. Yeah, that could be fine. I just don't see them making two. Well, they could. I just don't know if I see them making 2 trades, trading away that much draft capital. I feel like if they do a big time trade, they'll just do one. Thank you, Michael Petru. I appreciate that. If they go cheap, you want Marquise Brown. Yeah, I think he's a solid option out there. He could maybe go for around $10 million. Sorry if I missed some of your comments here. I'm sort of trying to catch up to some here. Why do I believe in Dobbs? Well, he's open at one of the highest rates in the NFL. He is pretty solid in contested catches. I think that if the Packers looked his way more often, he would put up much crazier numbers. I think the amount of talent in Green Bay has hindered his ability to put up big numbers because they spread it around so much. I think he has the talent to be great. Would you rather have DK Metcalf or Hendrickson? Definitely Hendrickson. What do I think the chances are Jair stays in Green Bay? I'm leaning towards the Packers moving on from Jair because I saw from Tom Silverstein of the Milwaukee Journal, that they didn't even approach him to take a pay cut because they didn't think he would accept it. So seeing stuff like that, it just feels like Jair's going to be gone. At the end of the day, could they bring him back? Yeah. Because if you could know for a fact that Jair would be healthy, then you keep him, because I don't think we've seen him really, his play drop off much when he's been playing, and the Packers were much better with him in the secondary in 2024. So the only reason I think the Packers move on from Jair is because of the injuries, which obviously is a big thing. He's missed so many games, and so there's just a lot of uncertainty there. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate all you guys coming in today. I think I'm about to close this one down. And if you want to hear my initial thoughts on this whole DK Metcalf situation, I touched on it a lot more at the beginning. So if you missed the beginning, feel free to go back, check it out. I sort of touch on the recent updates, recent things there. So feel free to give that a look. But thank you guys for watching. I'll be out with more content in the next week. I mean, we should see a lot of stuff go down in the next week with free agency, all that kind of stuff. So feel free to turn on the post notifications so you don't miss all the Packers updates. If you haven't subscribed, feel free to subscribe. But I appreciate all you guys for tuning in. And it's the first time I've gone live in a while, but it's fun to talk with you guys. So appreciate you guys as always. And I'll see you guys soon.